Yeah, hey Mark, how are you?
Good to see you, Adam.
Mark, I actually once worked for Mark. So if this is some sort of a like elaborate ruse for like a well-delayed performance review,
Yes.
I think it really was really
We'll see how it goes. You have about 29 minutes. Let's see.
okay. Well, thank you very much for obviously for being a sponsor of as well of Streaming Summit, continuing to help support that, which is fantastic. But we're going to get into a discussion around sports and streaming, and obviously Brightcove is a big player in a lot of enterprise endeavors. But can we just talk first? Can you just tell us a little bit about Brightcove and certainly its place in sports right now and what you guys are doing?
Yep. Look, our vision for the company is to be the most trusted streaming technology company in the world, and we run effectively an end-to-end platform for most major and I would call sort of mid-tier media companies around the globe and in North America to tackle streaming from a full technology perspective. And I like to sometimes describe it in sports as sort of t-shirt sizes, right? That some folks might need a small, might need a medium, might need a large, might need an extra large, and we kind of are able to handle all of those things. Best example I can give from recent times is the NHL moved over to our platform over last summer. We moved them over in like 40 days, 45 days, which was...
Sounds tight.
It was a little tight, but it's a lot of assets moving over. And they mostly use us to power NHL.com and the 30 plus websites of the teams. So that's mostly on-demand streaming of roughly short-form video, right? So I'd call that it's a medium because it's the NHL and it's high volume and high traffic and those kind of things. But that could be sort of a small and medium use case. But why they picked us, I think, or part of the reason they picked us, besides the reliability and the scalability and the cost of ownership we can deliver, is the fact that when they needed to turn on some preseason live streaming games because they weren't carried on ESPN Plus or they weren't part of another package, we can light up a full live stream like that, right? Because we do that around the globe for hundreds and hundreds of other media companies at major scale. So our capabilities to run fully from on-demand to live, from sort of small use cases to big, and having been in the business for 20 plus years, we have all those capabilities to go. So in sports, we're doing that both domestically for leagues and like MLS and the NHL. We're doing it for television networks and other streaming entities domestically, and then we're doing it internationally with major players. So take a Sky Mexico or a Coupang in Korea or TVer in Japan, who are all streaming either large sporting events, including the Olympics and other things like that. We're streaming those live events and on demand for them on a global basis. So we really do stretch pretty far and wide in the sports space and view it a little bit, I think a lot of folks focus very North America when they think about sports, but we're also very, global in our thinking about it.
Sky Mexico is the larger of the t-shirt sizes, I would say?
Yes, that's 175, I don't know, live channels.
As an example.
Yeah, live channels, or you can take someone like TVer is effectively the Hulu of Japan, right? And they're effectively doing a lot of on-demand, but when the Olympics comes around, it becomes a mixture of on-demand and live. And you see the same thing in a lot of other places. So yeah, so there's some big t-shirt sizes, right? Whole live streaming. And I wouldn't say that live streaming is necessarily bigger or smaller than on-demand. It's a more complex use case as opposed to the simpler version of VOD, which we've tackled for decades.
And having been at CBS prior to Brightcove, the Super Bowl would be considered a big, like single.
Super extra large, right? So I've streamed.
So you actually did work prior to Brightcove on a very, very big streaming.
So as Adam intimates, I was the chief digital officer at Paramount, prior the CEO of CBS Interactive. That's when Adam and I worked together. And we did stream incredible major events, including the Super Bowl four times over my tenure there. And what I'd say is that when I got to Brightcove and having come from something of that scale, one of the first things I noticed is that our scale is actually of the same size, if not larger. Now, not on an individual event like that, but on a broad basis across hundreds of companies, we're seeing that type of scale.
I would imagine providing support is challenging, right? You mentioned, it's like Korea and Mexico. I mean, we're talking time zones around the globe, right? So your operation is scaled, obviously, to handle that nonstop, right?
Yeah, we have a global customer success and customer service organization that runs in all time zones. We have effectively a live team that operates out of multiple time zones. We have a large facility in Guadalajara, which is in time zone here for North America, and then we also have folks in APAC that run sort of the other side of the time zones, and it works out incredibly well. We're lucky to be the scale we are to be able to do that. Otherwise, you struggle with handling those things. And the great part is that because we're a big enough company, we're able to serve smaller customers with those sort of same capabilities, right? Yeah. So the larger customers help us, afford to be in those markets, and therefore, play out. I was down in Australia and New Zealand a couple weeks ago, meeting with customers where we have 7 network, 9 network, TV New Zealand, Discovery New Zealand, Sky down there as well. And when you have that kind of heft in a market, you can really serve that market, right? And really do well there. So we find the same thing. Sort of layering into the different regions.
It's really reassuring, I would think, for some smaller groups to hear that you are working across various size operations, right? Because I would think a lot of times, if you're not the giant thing, maybe.
I think if you're Moto America is a new customer of ours over the last quarter or two that we streamed the Daytona 200 because doing it in motorcycles is a lot harder than doing it in cars. Let's be honest. So we stream that for them live. I mean, they can have a lot of faith.
By the way, those people are crazy.
I'm 100% crazy. I wouldn't even get on them.
I hope I didn't disparage anybody in the room.
In a good way, in a good crazy, But I think what you see there is that that company could turn to a number of solution providers for different pieces of their stack. I think what the value we really bring is doing the full suite of things and then having the capability to really scale with them. Where you say well, I need to scale this one piece, so I might need to go to an individual vendor. And our point is no, you don't. We can actually handle the full pieces for you and be able to do that. And you can have faith in that because we're doing it on a larger scale, for numerous others.
Sure.
And give people that capability.
Let's move on a little bit here, if you don't mind. I want to talk a little bit about the sort of the broader space of streaming as it relates to sports, or even just streaming as it. As the fireside chat is entitled, it's streaming's place, because it's not all streaming, obviously, but streaming is increasingly a more important aspect of sports and fan engagement. Can you just talk a little bit about the broader sports market for the direct-to-consumer offerings, the bundled offerings, et cetera? What do you think is really, where are we right now and where are we headed?
I think what's so great about the way the space is transitioned is I think it is very fan-centric, right? Fans are now able to get more than they ever have before. And you do notice there's sometimes a lot of complaining, right? They're well, that one's on Peacock and that one's over here and I can't figure it out. I'm well, you used to be able to get none of those, right? So it is a benefit. Or you used to have to pay, you used to have to only be able to get it through Sunday Ticket if you're an NFL fan. And sometimes that existed, League Pass and Center Ice, but then it didn't in other sports. I think we're at a great time for the consumers that you can get anything you want. You might have to pay for it and you might have to look around a little bit, but you can effectively get every event, all the way down to incredible high school and college sports. I can stream my daughter's 8th grade basketball game, right, via, it's not Huddle, it's the other one, via PlayOn, right? So there's just an incredible bevy of options, to be able to watch sports at all levels via streaming. So it's been an incredible opening of the market. Where we are in North America is at the professional level, it's all about the money, right? And it's going to be all about who can pay the license fees. And these leagues are built upon the salaries that get paid to the players based on those league television rights. I think what'll be interesting about the next 10 years is how those things shuffle around between the services, right? You've seen MLS go to Apple, you've seen NHL effectively with ESPN, and a little bit of a few others. You're seeing the NBA go through it right now.
Right.
We don't really know where that's going to land, although I have some opinions.
Oh, we'll get to that.
Yeah, and so I think it's going to be a really interesting time as those big leagues, trade rights. I think you're seeing in international markets, oftentimes a similar, menu play out, but with fewer players, right? There'll be fewer sports and fewer bidders, so the rights don't go as big. And then in often cases, you'll see global leagues use streaming as a way to reach beyond their core territory. So take F1, who has, I think license rights in probably 20 to 30 territories. They have 70 territories they're hitting with their own direct-to-consumer app.
Amazing.
So you sort of look at that and say, it's a great way to expand the audience, and when you add up the fandom across territories like that, there really is a tremendous opportunity, for some of these even more niche sports. Take a Moto America or something that you'd say well, how big is that fan base? Well, if you add up the super fans across the globe, it becomes a very big number and meaningful number for people.
Right. And F1 just buying now rights for
Yep.
another motorcycle group, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Dorna.
yeah. There's going to be obviously the opportunity to then for them, as an example, to start to promote using F1 channels more opportunities.
Look, I think the way the creator economy sort of expanded what entertainment is for people, right? That it wasn't just the 8 to 10 p.m. hour on broadcast television, and then it was cable, and now it's creator. I think the same thing is happening in sports, and that you're seeing, is it NFL? Is it other professional sports? Is it now college sports? I mean, women college sports now. I mean, basketball is just
amazing,
incredible, and the money that's going to be made there as well. And then you're seeing it even stretch further into what I would call more niche and super fan sports, and all the way down to various age levels and all those pieces. So, and streaming's been a huge factor in aiding that growth of fandom, I think.
What do you think about the sort of the breakdown in the regional sports network situation? I mean, that's
a big topic here for the broadcasters, I'm sure. A big topic here at NAB for the broadcasters.
Of course, yeah. I mean, this is a point of inflection, right? I mean, we're seeing a change. Do you think that there's a place for that in the future? Is there spots?
Yeah, look, my take is that a few of them are going to last because they have long-term deals with the team and or owned by the team, have an economic model that actually functions. They're getting paid correctly either by the users or by the operators, and they're funding it. But it's a few.
Yeah.
I think it's maybe a handful. And
they're in big markets.
Yes, it's New York.
Right.
We'll see how New York goes, but if the Knicks keep winning, we'll be fine. But it's New York and LA and Chicago and a few others that have really solid long-term deals. I think it's the rest are going to, sort of fall away because their models were upside down and they levered the companies up with debt, and they'll likely go, under, or what is effectively under, right? Give the rights back to the team and say, good luck, monetize that. And what you're seeing is the sort of messiness that comes out of that is there's 12 different models being, somebody's paying one team in one market to stream it and somebody else is not, and sometimes they're going direct and sometimes they're licensing to broadcast, and where does that model come out? I do think there's a good model for broadcasters now that we're here at NAB, that you can broadcast a number of games. You can't do, and in the NBA, you can't do all 80 games. There's just no schedule that makes that work. But you can do 20 or 30, right, of those 80 games, and then you can put the rest on another platform where streaming, I think, can really be an additive factor. And I know the leagues are thinking about how they continue to support the teams in doing that, and there's just a little bit of a breakdown in sort of who's getting what right now as these things go through. But I ultimately think you'll see a hybrid model in each market, right, where there'll be some form of direct-to-consumer service where you can get the games, and there'll be a broader model, right, a broadcast type, free to the user or, very broadly distributed type of model for a certain number of games that comes there.
And you can never underestimate the power of free, is what I like to tell people. And I think but again, that's going to be a limited, potentially subset of games in markets, right? And you're still going to need potentially the direct-to-consumer model of the streaming operation.
Absolutely. And I think it's going to impact the economics of the leagues. We're going to see how it goes. But then, there's some pushback on the national rights too, right? There's some big games up for bid this year.
Interesting time right now to be like an agent for a big player coming up on a contract, I would think, in some of these leagues.
Yeah, I think we'll see. I mean, we'll see how that goes. Depends on the sport, right?
True.
NFL will be great.
We're good. With just on the one last thing on the sports network, regional sports networks, ESPN recently just added the opportunity for some of those networks to be integrated into their system. Any thoughts about that?
I'm really curious to see how those economic models work out, because if those folks were getting paid X dollars per sub in their local market and they put it on ESPN, I don't believe ESPN is paying them X dollars per sub. Yeah. So it's really going to be, that may be a temporary stopgap for viewership, but I'm really curious to see how it plays out from an economic perspective.
I mean, is it an opportunity for ESPN basically to bring people in to say,
yeah,
and then we have other things.
And if ESPN can pull it off and start raising price and really finding a way to pay them, I think it could be really interesting, but that's not where they are, right? They still haven't gone with a full direct-to-consumer product, which I still sort of struggle with why that hasn't happened yet. I know it's going to happen. They keep talking about it like it's next year, and I think it will. I'm just surprised why they've waited, until now. I mean, it just seems like it's a no-brainer that they have to do it, and it has to come.
So elephant in the room, of course, with sports over the past few months is the announcement of a joint venture, which people are calling Spooloo, for those who haven't heard that term, a sports Hulu-esque thing. interesting assortment of players there, right? And obviously missing some things, right? You don't have the CBS Paramounts of the world, the NBCs of the world, but what do you have?
Yeah.
What is that offering in your opinion? I mean, obviously this is pure speculation, and we're on stage here at NAB
Look,
Streaming Summit. What do you think?
Fox has a tremendous amount of rights. ESPN has the most, right? They have and billions of dollars of commitments going forward, and have locked up a lot of things for a long time. Turner less so, right? They have an NBA deal that's up. That's why I think actually that NBA deal is probably make or break for Turner Sports in a big way, because if they don't have that deal, I don't know what really they're contributing. They're not contributing as much to that joint venture, and then it sort of falls, it doesn't fall apart. It may not need that third player. Look, I think what you've found is that the great rebundling is here of television, right? Television went out in the United States as, it was 3 major networks, then 4 major networks, then, a bunch of other broadcast stations, then cable networks. You got to 500 channels. You realize, wait, we're 24/7 linear, 500 channels, 400 and X of which nobody's, you're only watching 12 to 17 yourself. And so those things started to contract again. I think that's where we are. So really now you need to find a way to reach those consumers with sort of individual services that mean something to them. Sports was a big anchor for that package, right? And now what you're seeing is the great rebundling says, could there be an all sports, just sports package? And I think it's just really hard to put together, right? You have too many powerful constituencies, from the leagues to the broadcasters to others, that like getting 100% of sports in one service is effectively, by the way the business is put together, probably impossible.
Yeah.
So can you get close? And this venture, I think, is the first swing at saying, like, well, we can get to like 50%, or I'm exaggerating, maybe it's some lesser percentage, but it's pretty close. It's a lot. And so could you put a price together that folks would be willing to pay there? And my bet is some. We'll see. We've got to see what those rights are that really shake out. But I think for ESPN and for Fox, it does make sense to sort of join forces and solidify what was that sports pack in your cable bundle, and try to like make it themselves, and adding in Turner to get them pretty far down the road. It just sort of excludes, as you said, the 2 other major broadcasters in the world, in the US, in CBS and NBC, who you never know, like could be add-ons, just like you saw those regional sports networks added to ESPN. So I'm very curious, I'm very interested. I don't think it's a big, they make it sound like it's this big technological lift and having their great own service. I mean, they don't even have to have their own service to start, in my opinion. They could just, sell as a suite of channels underneath some of the others on Apple or Amazon, or some of the already pre-bundlers. So, and I do think YouTube TV is a force to be reckoned with Sunday Ticket and all the rights that they have from there for, $70 for the base, and, plus the Sunday Ticket piece. They probably have the other pieces. If you're a huge sports fan, you get Spulu and YouTube TV, and you're probably like
basically done.
Set.
Yeah.
You don't need anything else.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's a challenge, right? Because if you're the casual consumer and you think, oh, there's going to be a sports bundle, in your mind, you immediately go to, it's going to have everything.
Yeah.
Well, it's not going to have everything, right? I mean, the NFL rights are locked up on, on CBS and NBC side for years. We talked about NBA. I mean, is there an opportunity potentially, especially for Turner?
I struggle with that the individual leagues, those league pass products, the Sunday Ticket, the center ice, like the fact that those haven't been the answer is the struggle for me. Like, I think if you're a fan of the sport and you want to, go directly, the problem is they've made it too hard, right? Like, you go directly, but you can't get your local games. You got to go get that somewhere else.
Right.
Like, they've made it, it's not brain surgery, but it's hard enough for the
Or it's
casual.
blacked out because it's a national rights deal to a specific.
So, like, why I'm intrigued, at least, part of what we help these companies do too, and I don't mean it as an ad for Brightcove, but like as a sort of reason for existing for streaming, is like they need to have direct-to-consumer optionality going forward, because over time, I think the consumer is more likely to gravitate to the NHL brand than to ESPN, ABC for NHL, right? I think in the long run, it probably becomes, their own and direct,
Right.
and more relationships become direct, and we're seeing that happen around the globe, that it's not necessarily about aggregation, but more about folks going direct and owning their own capability to execute against those things. But I think it's a long
That's what MLS did with Apple, right? I mean, they own it. It's in one place.
Absolutely.
Right. Some of that topic you just talking about is a little, predicated on the eventuality of cable
Yes.
changing, right? I mean, that's that world is going to change.
Yeah, and definitely in the US, very different than around the globe. It's really interesting to watch that the strength of broadcast and multi-channel platforms almost in every other territory in the world has been much stronger, has retained much better than in the US. And what you've seen in the US is an absolute, free fall of those subs. And
Just curious, before you go on, why do you think that's the case?
I think the answer is there was so much competition here that it enabled more competition to sprout up, and sort of when that happened, then there was like the dam broke and it opened up. In the other markets, there's less, there's fewer. There's not, a cable operator and a satellite operator and a telco operator in every territory trying to compete on price and do these other, at the end of the day. And let's be honest, the technology, broadcast is pretty amazing technology, one to many, right? Cable QAM, it was okay. Satellite couldn't go two ways. Like, the internet kind of won out for all of its capabilities there. It wasn't necessarily cheaper, but was maybe more efficient in the way it could deliver. I think in some of those smaller markets or those broader global markets, it's sort of like, they didn't need to fight the technology so hard. So I think you're seeing those transitions happen. They're just happening slower. And I think you're seeing an ability to retain sort of those more multi-channel bundles. And those bundles weren't as big. They didn't have 500 channels, right? They had, a little bit less and a little bit more focused on what they were delivering to the consumer. So it's curious to see how it plays out over time. But I thought there was going to be a floor at those multi-channel subs, and I think the only thing holding that floor up is YouTube TV and Hulu and a few of the virtuals.
And things like NFL.
Yes.
Right?
That are held to those pieces.
Right, exactly. So it's interesting, though, you look at some of the data on that topic specifically, even the growth of something like YouTube TV and it offering things like, Sunday Ticket isn't offsetting the losses overall in cable. Right?
Yep.
So the writing is on the wall, right? The predictions, latest studies show next year it's the tipping point of 50% of households paying for those bundles, and it's only going to decline, right? So I think it's just, to your point, it's going to raise opportunity.
My sense is that every brand needs to have a direct-to-consumer proposition that really anchors what they deliver to the consumer and says, this is what we have, what we deliver it for, the price or business model in which you deliver it, and you need to be able to do it over the internet. There's no better medium. And then you can be bundled or shaped or pushed into different business models through some of those larger distributors. Like I always felt like Amazon, Google, and some of the other, sort of connected TV aggregators like Samsung, LG, the others, would have a better capability to bundle those things than folks doing it themselves, right? There's all these talks about like, oh, Paramount and Peacock are going to do a joint venture. I'm like, that's hard for them. What's much easier is Amazon saying, your price is $5 and your price is $5. Let's put you together for $10.
Right.
They have more power to be able to do that. And so I do think those things are playing out, but in subtler ways than I thought. I thought it would happen faster, but I think it will continue to happen. But that doesn't absolve the brands from needing to have their own direct-to-consumer proposition. Right? You need to have it, even if it's a smaller one for a few million subs or some smaller portion of your audience. We see it as a great anchor. We did it, when we were at CBS. CBS All Access anchored a price, which enabled CBS to be able to negotiate those deals that allowed Paramount Plus to be what it is today. You see AMC, one of our customers, going out with AMC Plus, enabling it to have the negotiations it has, with its distributors. Like you see it across the board. It's very necessary, in order to play in those multi-channel recollections and rebundling, is that like, what is your direct-to-consumer proposition?
We'll have a few minutes left here, and maybe we'll take a question or two from the audience. But before we do that, so think about, if you have a question, raise your hand in a moment. The fast platforms, fast landscape, a lot of hype, but also there's a lot of engagement. There's a lot, people are talking about budgets moving there because you can do the targetability, et cetera. And it's lean back, sort of let it fly programming that people still want. They don't want to have to make the decision of like, what am I going to watch right now? Just put something on and let it go. Any thoughts about that with regards to sports? Yeah,
so I'd start with CTV, $25 billion-ish market is what folks are saying. Although if you listen to Dave Morgan and Simul Media, he can't find 5 of the billion. It's lost somewhere in the ecosystem, trying to track it. But so it's a big ad market. I think the issue that you face is that I think everybody's like, well, I'll just the new thing is to launch a fast channel. Well, if you have a niche audience product, you're not going to make any money, right? You have to think about, like you said, it's hard to argue with free, but free needs advertising support, roughly,
Right.
and that needs volume, right? You can't, you have to divide by 1,000 and times by the CPM. That becomes very little dollars if you don't have a lot of audience, especially if you're sharing it 50-50 or 70-30 or whatever it is with the platforms. So I always caution folks that, like, if you have a fast channel concept, but you are a niche provider, like, start on your own platform and keep all the money first, and then see if you can get the distribution to really gauge you up. Otherwise, you should probably be thinking about a subscription platform, right? If you have a niche audience. So on the sports side,
Or a sponsorship model.
sponsorship models works as well. Something that you know what you're going to get paid. On the sports side, I think what you're seeing is a lot of replay and a lot of highlight and a lot of sort of collections content. You're not seeing a ton of live games, right? You don't see it across those fast platforms. That could change, right? I think there are certainly what I would call low economic need sports, right? They don't need to get paid $10 a sub because they're not paying, Jalen Brunson a lot of money after he scores all the points, right?
It's your daughter's basketball game.
Yeah, well, Play-On's an incredible model. I think, Flow Sports, I think, is here. They're more subscription model, but I think there's some of these other ones that just don't have a huge economic need that you could see a way to doing a fast channel that would be really additive maybe to the audience that they're going after, and really try to make a bigger tent, for those games.
Question? Anybody with a question? Raise your hand. Yep, right here. You shout it out since we don't have a handheld.
Hi, I look at TV. Question about defining a sports fan, which is really important. Is it a sport? Is it NBA? Is it I'm dedicated to a market, so I'll watch anything from the market I will watch? Or what does that landscape look like to help us define what is the packaging structure that works for the business?
Let's
I'll repeat it.
Yeah, go ahead.
So yes, what's a sports fan? Is a sports fan of an individual team or a market or a set of sports, or, and I'd say, look, I think you have to look at it in a few ways, right? First, there are regional fans. I'm a New York fan, right? I like, Knicks, I like the Rangers, I like the Yankees. I hate everybody from Boston, even though I run a company in Boston. And I went to school in Boston and all those things, so whatever.
And Philadelphia.
Yeah, and Philadelphia. I hate the Sixers now because they're going to play the Knicks, but you know what I mean. Like, you have regional fans. Then you have sports fans. Like, I'm a big basketball fan. I played basketball. Like, I love it. Like, and I like football, hockey a little less. So you have to sort of cross the matrix on those two things. That's typically all you need to do, right? And then you'll find what I would call super fans of a certain thing, right? if I love motorcycle racing, I love Moto America and Dorna, and that's what I love, right?
F1 poster child for that.
Right, F1 is super fans, right? You like that. Is it a football fan that likes F1? Maybe, but there's really not a whole lot of congruence there. And I would say there are super sports fans, people who will watch anything. Most of them are addicted gamblers, and they should probably live here in Vegas. Yeah. By the way, big audience, although it turns out maybe it was just one guy. I don't know if you guys read that article where the one guy lost like $400 million last year. No, so I do think there's a lot of cross sections, but I am going to use the women's college basketball tournament as an example where you brought in all kinds of casual fans to those games because you had an incredible story. And I think what's so great about that story is those women are making money, and they're making money not from being paid by a league or the television rights, right? They're getting paid by the NIL rights that have come through now, right? So Caitlin Clark is the second highest college paid college athlete, behind Bronny, by the way, which is so interesting. $3.2 million, all in effectively endorsements, right? State Farm, Nike, all these brands that she signed up because she's got incredible social media presence. She's probably the greatest, female college basketball player of all time. Maybe I shouldn't say female, or maybe the greatest college basketball player of all time. And we'll see how she plays out in the pros. But they actually make less money when they go pro. So it's going to be really interesting to see how you define fandom. Like, fandom may be of these people and the personalities that they bring. May have, I think there's a lot of people who are fans of her just because of the things she accomplished, but they don't really even have the appreciation for the sport. They're just so proud that she accomplished these things, right? And are they going to watch more basketball? I hope so, but it's not necessarily a given. And it may be of these individuals. And so I think you can actually start to track individual fandom, right? Like, if you're an F1 fan, you like Max, and you only like Max because he wins every race. I know it's frustrating. It's the car.
Yeah.
And so I think it's, you have to open your lens, right? I think it's
NBA has become that a little bit too, right? Because I know people who will only watch, they're following specific athletes. If those people move teams,
exactly.
they're moving their
The era of
allegiance.
free agency and the transfer portal in college and all these things has made it much more about the individual. And if you think about creator economy and what Instagram and TikTok have done for individuals, I think it does play into it. So I think you have to almost open your aperture. It's hard at DirecTV to do that into the individual, but that is, I think, the next phase. It's sport, region, all sports with its gambling, and then personality.
Great level setting question. I should have asked that at the very beginning. Thank you very. We'll have one more question. 1 minute because we're over.
Yep. Sorry, clubs is a great example. I agree, and we see super fandom of those clubs and of those teams, and kids being raised on those things, whether it's Manchester or the Knicks or whatever the next one is. So you're right. It is the club level is there, but you typically won't find somebody who's just a fan of one club and nothing else, right? Usually it's the sport or the region, and they add that to the place. And internationally, you find the clubs to be almost more like you go to, as you said, like English Premier League. There's so many teams in such a small geographic area. Same thing in Australia. Same thing in some of these other areas that it's like, in the U.S. we have this very centric view of like, oh, well, you're New York or Philly. It's like, at the end of the day, I think you can be, sort of narrowly focused on that region as well.
Okay, Marc, thank you very much for
You
making the time, obviously, and off we go.
Have a great show.